Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to day 13 of the Do You Rules live stream experience where we are exposing ourselves, or at least I'm exposing myself on what I do in life and how I apply the self improvement processes. I'm excited. I'm taking some deep breaths in my mind and getting settled in. Anxious, not anxious, excited, nervous energy, hyped. I'll settle in. Let's do what we normally do. Chapstick, check. Water, which I should open, check. Tell you what, recently I've been noticing my hands are very raw here. When I open the water, the bottled water, it irritates me. What time is it? She didn't speak to me, but it's 4:14 a.m. Where are you in your life today? Are you like me, eager to get on a microphone and talk until the back of your throat is raw and all the life that you have in you is sort of exhausted? Because this is exhausting more so than I realized. So I wanted to get into today momentum. I started to want to get into it yesterday. Yesterday didn't quite flow as I wanted it to. I would say that there were some insecure moments. I I don't know that the stream came out as well as the one previously did, or the ones that were even previous to those. I'll say this. If this is day 13 and I'm settling in, I'm letting my soul kind of find itself. Deep breaths are good. If this is day 13 and yesterday was day 12, I could argue that it's very likely that yesterday was my worst stream. And so much so that usually I watch my streams to review them and see what went well, what didn't go well. And I thought of it like I'm a sports guy, right? I use sports analogies. You lose a game, you watch the tape. I didn't want to watch the tape from yesterday. I just accepted that it may not have been the greatest of experiences, but nonetheless, it was an experience, and we have to be accepting of these days. Not that we have to, but I encourage you trying to stay away from have to. I got very triggered the other day on a post, and I'm starting to become sensitive to to telling people what they should do in this way. I've read many books on persuasion. I've read many books on influence, gone through a lot of content around it. And it's interesting. You want to talk about being persuaded and influenced. Just about every book I've read or every piece of content I've watched comes with a preface. Be careful, the information you're about to read is highly influential and it should be used in an ethical way. That's a lot of what persuasion and influence will drive you towards. The information that they're going to give you is super powerful. It'll change your life. You can use it to your advantage. Be ethical. And so, in that way, with respect, I don't want to judge anybody, but as far as how I formulate my mode of how I deliver my content, I went through a post where someone said something to the effect of, just work out every day, just put in the work, just hit the gym, just lift the weights, let them talk, and in 6 months, they'll still be average and nothing and nobody, and you'll be 6 months ahead of everybody. Now, I get the message. I get the premise. I encourage you to work out, but I don't think that I would ever encourage anyone to work out because it makes everyone else just average, right? And it makes you ahead of everyone else. I think that, yes, if you're looking to gain some strength and change your body and be healthier in that way, yes, there's a quantifiable and qualifiable measurement in health. You're going to live longer. And so a lot of my messages around fighting for your health is because then you're fighting for more life. And why else? What more incentive could you possibly need? But I have a very real and tangible sort of discomfort with demeaning people in the process. And I think I've experienced it from the perspective of in my professional journey, in my personal journeys, in my self-improvement journeys. A lot of times I do just want to get on the mic, or if I'm having conflict with somebody, I kind of look at them like, yo, like, who are you? Who are you? You know what I've done in my life? But I also believe that I have to fight that. And I fight that because I don't believe it to be true. Because the more I learn anything about self-improvement, the more I walk my path and go down this journey, what actually begins to reveal itself to me is how difficult this is, which means it's very, very difficult for me to be a human and try to do it to the best of my standards, which means I can only imagine what it means for you and anyone else to go through the same experience. And also, I don't know what you've been through. I know what I've been through. And so if we can surmise and say, I've been through a lot, which likely means you've been through a lot, which means we've all been through a lot, and we know what it feels like to go through a lot, I'm not going to judge you in any way. You want to work out? Cool. Are there some metrics and some data that says that average people do average things and this is what average means? Yes. Do I need to push it in your face and tell you you suck at life because of it? No, I don't. Do I want to? No. Are there times I do? Yes. But I fight that. And if anything, if for nothing else, the do you rules, I'm perfectly fine with your level of contentment in life, because I also believe in this way. I think it's jack of many trades, master of none, better than the master of one. There's a line like that, right? I reference it to say this. I can talk in many spaces. I've been through my physical journey. You know, I put in an hour to an hour and a half of either a combination of strength training and cardio every day. I know what that's done for me for the past few years. I've read a lot of books on spirituality. I've read a lot of books on faith. I can sort of talk to you about universal law. I could talk to you about Christian faith, mostly predominantly Catholicism, because I read the Bible and I went to church on every Sunday and I was an altar boy at some point. And I was raised that way, right? Don't judge me. Don't judge me. I can certainly, I've delved into the neuroscience. I talked about neurons that wire together or fire together, wire together. I understand the processes of how when you do hard things, there's certain chemicals and functions in your brain that start to build up, develop, and get bigger and better and stronger. I understand that you can rewire your thoughts and retrain your mind and the impact it has on you. I understand I read a book called The Emotions of Normal People that go into the disc theory, where everybody is sort of the theory is that everyone is born with an emotion of dominance, inducement, submission, and I believe it's compliance. And so in that way, I could talk about what some of the logic is around how our bodies are built, how our minds are built, how our emotions impact it, and how you want to use the emotion to build the thoughts and then change your life. I understand that, again, so I say all this to say, I don't know that I'm the master of any yet. I'm trying to become the master as far as influence goes. I talk about the do you rules. We talk in present tense. I'm an influencer. And as I'm influencing, I certainly want to be, categorically speaking, at a high level, because I like doing this. I enjoy doing this. And so in that way, I would encourage you to say, if you're looking to be in the fitness space and you want to be a fitness influencer, go be the best. You want to be a walker, be the best walker, be the best runner that you can be relative to what you think you want to do in your life. And so I say all that to back to the jack of all trades, master of none, better than the master of one, to also say that I feel very confident that I can have a conversation with you in many different spaces in many different areas, from the idea that I was able to broaden my scope and perspective, and I understand what it's done for my life, and hopefully it could do the same for you. And if it makes sense, cool. If it doesn't, cool. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, great. It's not gonna have that much of an impact on me in the way of, it is what it is. A lot of cliche terms, but I'm cliche Jeff for that reason. But I think there's a lot of logic, right? I'm also a logic-based professional. I've been applying logic and engineering mindsets and building and managing things, whether it's people, process, or technology, in a way that is tangible and real, and comes back to what I hope to promote for the self-improvement experience, which is whatever it is you're going to look to do to quantify and qualify and define who you are as a person. I've said this many times. You'll see me as an influencer, but let me make sure I'm still streaming. Yep. But I'm not fully defined as an influencer. The way I'm not fully defined by my 9 to 5 profession, the way I'm not fully defined by the success and the material that comes with it. I'm defined by who I am as a person, what my morals and values and disciplines are, and how I execute on them on a second to second, minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year, for as long as I live basis. I had to learn that. I learned that through the power of falling on my face over and over and over, and sort of having the traditional midlife crisis epiphany of, is this it? And I talked a little bit deeper about what my journey is and how I got here, and my conversation with God, and how God, not he, how, because God is everything, how God was, and I don't limit God to one specific image or structure or label. So God said this to me, and so I've been responding to it since then, and that's my 180, my about face that I did in life. Because not only have I sucked at life, but I still suck at life sometimes. That's just the reality. So for me to start to say, and this, I got tangential from the perspective of, I really hate the demeaning talk, I'm better than you because I do this. Now, I'm just better than me. And a lot of that goes into the analogies and the cliches of only compare to yourself 1% better every day. If I'm in competition with me, I feel great about comparing, because where was I yesterday? Yesterday, I didn't feel how I'm feeling right now. Right now, I'm feeling it, right? Ooh, I'm feeling it. I feel great about my life right now. And it's not to say I didn't feel great yesterday, but my experience, I wasn't flowing as much. And so going all the way back full circle to how I went off on my sidebar here, my elbow's hurting. I can feel it. I can feel it hurting a little bit. That's okay. Today is back and biceps. You know, I got to make sure I'm ready for that. I got to make sure I'm ready for that. All right. So yesterday, certainly I didn't want to watch that videotape, and that's okay. What I wanted to drive home about that point is, as we build momentum, as we better ourselves, because we're going to talk a little deeper about momentum today. The power of momentum will help you get through. And I want to also say and share that despite how I felt yesterday, and not only did I not feel like I wanted to, so what we got to assess these things and evaluate, like in business, right? We make business decisions, we make an investment. Sometimes the investment pays off, sometimes the investment doesn't the way we wanted it, but the investment still pays off in that if you don't take lessons learned from it, then you're going to keep making bad investments. Imagine that. Now you make an investment, you don't get the return on investment you wanted, and then you keep making the same investment. It's sort of like a gambler, right? You keep putting money into the horse racing or the slot machine, and every now and again you get that sensation of, oh, I won. But if most of the time you're losing, you're just winning back more money to lose. And so in that way, you haven't made any progress outside of all I keep doing. Oh, and think of it like this. If I make the same investment, I can expect the same return. So if I do nothing different is going to happen. You can scale that concept out to everything you do. And so not bad investments, but low return on investments, if you keep depositing and investing in that way, you keep getting low returns. So, all right, cool. Why is that significant for our growth, our self-improvement process, our journey to 1,000 hours? Lessons learned. You can apply this in business. You can apply this in relationships. You can apply this just about everywhere. When something doesn't go according to plan, you assess and evaluate what happened that caused this to go a little bit south. And I talk about being on task, on target, and I talk about making a decision, sticking with it. I talk about having an agenda. That way we have a framework, a sustained framework, that if I follow these steps and I follow these processes, that's what self-improvement is about, right? I build momentum in this direction. I always can be And that's a lot of what I talk about in business. What'll make you successful in business? What'll make something that we want to invest in tangible for us? It's got to be something that's predictable. It's why I talk about, if you want to talk about investments, I can talk about the market to a degree. I'm not fully ignorant, but you want to have a debate on, hey, I want to invest in this stock or this ETF because it's going to give me a dividend. Or there's also the reality that the S&P 500, at least over the past 5 years, has returned at least 10% on the money. Sometimes 12, sometimes 16. What's more fruitful? Well, how much do you want to pay attention to the market? You want to be a day trader and you want to get up and you want to be at pre-market hours at 4 o'clock until you realize you can't just wake up at 4 o'clock. You got to wake up at 2 o'clock. You got to prepare yourself and get ready, because if you're trading and it's frenetic and there's so much competition, you got to be prepared. You got to have the data information. So where are you with how much are you expecting in return, and how much are you willing to give that investment? As I always say too, you're going to pay in a lot more than you receive out. So in that way, I'm very conscious of, well, what are you looking to get out of this investment? So on the self-improvement journey, what are you looking to get out of your self-improvement journey? What's your priority? How much time can you realistically invest? If you can only really invest a minimal and a marginal amount of your time, your effort, and your energy, then you might want to find the most predictable route to give you the highest return. And sometimes it's just, all right, I get a 4% match from my job for 401k. Just keep putting money in there. Maybe turn it on to aggressive. Maybe seek help from a financial advisor, right? Maybe if you're like me and you have a partner, significant other, maybe they have more time to invest in it. So you kind of have discussions and meetings and talk about what you want to do for progress, but let them do the high majority of the managing of where the finances go. That's an option. It's a possibility. All right. So in that way, you want to make what you do as repeatable as possible. And you want to repeat, I believe, I've learned in my experience, if you're looking to apply some logic, if I find something that works, it's like everything is sort of like you're chopping at a tree, right? Or you're digging a hole. Like the tree might be monstronously huge and large, and it's not going to come down with one chop. But I know if I keep chopping and 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 chopping at this tree, eventually the tree will fall. If I keep digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging, the hole's gonna eventually get bigger. If I plant the seed in the ground and I keep the water and I keep the light, I let it go through seasons, I let it see some dark, eventually it'll grow. It might start as a little tiny little plant. It might grow into that large, magnanimous, monstrous tree. The key is, excuse me, like everything we talk about on the Do You rules, is the consistency and ensuring you're applying maximum level of effort to the degree you're able to apply maximum level of effort to this repeatable process. Don't give up, don't quit, don't give in. And simply, if you're gonna chop down that crazy big, large, outrageous tree, and one day, it's funny. I was looking at the weather. I look at the weather in the morning. It's 30 degrees by me, and it feels hot. I could even feel my house working a lot less to provide the heat because it's not as cold as it's been. And I say only 30 degrees, but it's been like 1 degree, or at least you look at the temperature, it'll say 12 degrees feels like 1. We went through a serious cold front. In any event, I enjoy the little winds. I don't mind the cold. I don't mind the hot. I know when I'm going through the season of winter, I just expect it to be cold. I expect it to be cold. So when I got to lace up my shoes, it's that traditional motivational cliche inspirational theme song. I got to lace them up. I got to lace them up the same way I got to lace them up, whether I have a good experience and a good episode and one I want to watch or one I don't want to watch, right? It's Monday. It's 4:32. Let me do something real quick. Set a timer for 5 a.m. All right. I want to make sure I'm on target, on task. And I do want to, one of the things that got me back into momentum, I think feeling good about my life, was I haven't been scripting. I've been putting a lot of energy and effort into going live. And going live is you could probably surmise, if you do this, it's a very different experience. It requires, if you grew up like me, the hip hop era, I think there's one thing to writing a song, there's another thing to freestyling. And some people are very gifted to freestyle, and you listen to them freestyle, and you're like, oh my God, they're amazing. Then you hear them write a song, and it's like, wow, you freestyle so much better. You hear some people write great songs, they can't freestyle. You know, I would guess that me coming on here, although I have an agenda, we're talking about momentum, we're building momentum. I There's a different energy and effort that comes with doing this, and I like it. It's exciting. It's fun. There's a thrill to it. But I also enjoy writing out a script, and I enjoy writing out a script because I learn new words almost daily. At least I try to. I'm also reading a book, a vocabulary book on how to maximize your words. Like, if you're using words that are in this category, you can try these. And so in that way, sometimes I forget, especially when I'm freestyling, because I haven't built momentum on those words and on that new language. But when I'm writing and I'm scripting, I'm like, oh, and I also take notes. I also put them in my notes to say, these are like 12 words I want to use. I'm more inclined to use them in a script because I have time to stop, pause, and reflect and include them, have more intentionality around that. And also what I found that writing does is, and I don't know why sometimes I'm uncomfortable when I discover things about myself. There's a creative element, and I really enjoy being creative. I enjoy allowing my thoughts to just like, I sort of let go. And when I let go, it makes me feel good. And part of the repeatable processes of life that I would love for anybody to consider to implement as you're building momentum, if you find that something makes you feel good, repeat it. My point to all this was that, and I'm gonna close the loop on the tree and repeatable process in that regard, is that when I'm doing this, I'm not writing, because I built so much momentum towards scripting and I enjoy scripting, I felt a little void. I felt an emotional void, like I wasn't getting something. In the same way, because I'm putting so much effort into live content and content creation, and also I've been focusing on Instagram lately. And when I go back through my spreadsheet through self-reflection, I can see that if I put in about 55 to 60 hours already of self-improvement for the month, half of that is on content creation. And if half of that is on content creation, the 100% I put in for content creation, let's say which equates to 30 hours, it might be that like 20 of it was on live. Whereas before, in previous years, before I started going live, because I didn't really go live that much last year, if I had put 30 hours into content creation, 20 of that was probably scripting. The other 10 was actually recording, editing, creating thumbnails. So in that way, I built up an emotional love towards scripting. I love to sit down and write. I've always liked to write. I struggle with journaling, ironically enough, but I think it's because sometimes I still struggle with seeing my emotional self in words that way. I prefer to see my emotional self sort of revealed and exposed more this way. I feel like talking about it helps me more. Point being, I learned this about myself through my self-improvement journey. I know that and it's funny because I have gone through ebbs and flows of journaling. I'll read something I wrote down 3, 4 years ago and go, oh, I remember that feeling, and that feels good. But also in the same way now, I'll watch an episode I recorded last year and know that I scripted it and say, ooh, I remember what it was like to script. My program holds all my scripts. I'll go back to a script that I might have written, a year ago, and it's like, ooh, wow, the evolution of my thoughts and my flows. And so what I realized when I started to script yesterday was I got a rush of love and a rush of positivity and a rush of positive emotion that made me feel much better about life, which at that time when I started to script, I had just finished working out. So it was about 8:30, 8:45. And if you haven't, not that if you care, but on the weekends, my wife and I agree I got from 3:30 to 9:30. So I know I have 45 minutes. I was scripting, but I was so into what I was scripting that my timer went off for 9:30 and I was like, oh shit, I feel like I just sat down a script. But there was a massive transition in my day. I would say that from 3:30 till I sat down to 8:30, 8:45, I was sort of low. I still did my thing, which is the point of what I was saying. But I felt the swing, the pendulum just, I was like really low, and today's gonna be a bad day. And I was convincing myself, and I started to say to myself, no, it's not, 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 no, it's not. And then boom, the pendulum swang back to, oh, I feel how I normally feel, which is great about life, because I started to script. And so in that way, you power through, repeat some process that you like. Back to the tree analogy too, when you're chopping, you're chopping, you're chopping, you're chopping, you're chopping, and you see a small tree on the side. The small tree might be easier to chop, but that's not your intention. Stay focused on what you're doing. Keep chopping the tree you're chopping, and you'll always make progress in the direction you're making. So as I think I also closed the loop on knowing that I may not have had the most pleasurable and greatest episode experience. And there's a reality too. You think about if somebody decided to click on the Do You rules and they went through episode 12, they might unsubscribe or they might just keep going. That's and then you worry because you don't want to expect specific outcomes, but also if I'm going to make myself quote unquote vulnerable this way and expose myself to the world because I'm looking also for some reciprocity and some people to engage. Like I said, if God is in search of himself and the Do You rules is a movement of God in search of himself, then for it to come to fruition the way I think it's going to come to fruition, we got to find out. We got to find out where we meet, and we got to expand and expound on this thing and make it as dope as possible. Which means we got to broaden this to as broad as it can be, right? If I don't know if I'm intended to become that big, large, monstrous, crazy, massive tree that grew from little baby tree to you look up and you're like, oh, is that me? I'm prepared for it if that's what it is. I'm also prepared to be the baby tree. So I just keep chopping either way. And so what I wanted to close the loop on with that experience, I still was able to have a great rest of my day despite what I felt after I finished recording. I and I think that's possible for you and I and all of us. You can have a day that doesn't start off great, and you can talk yourself out of that because we're always talking ourselves. If you find yourself on the opposite end of love, which is fear, and all the derivatives of fear, anxiety, stress, overwhelm, it's gloomy, dark, uncomfortable, then you got to force yourself and force yourself and force yourself at least back to the middle, at least back to the middle. And maybe if you're lucky enough and you have the right support system and you have the right thoughts and processes in place and the right framework that's repeatable, eventually at some point, even if for a moment in time for that day, you go, oh, this is a great day, right? It was still a great day. So I offer you the encouragement to consider that regardless of how the day starts, it doesn't have to end that way. It doesn't have to be in the middle that way. And it doesn't have to snowball into bad. It's not to say that you're not going to have bad days. Some days are going to be less than others. Some episodes are going to be better. Some days you can lift, you feel like you can lift the gym out of the foundation in the concrete. Sometimes you can't lift what will be just a standard weight you would lift that you would get 12 to 15 reps. Maybe you only get 2 to 3. It's just like that sometimes. Do you not lift that day? Nah, you go lighter. You go lighter. So in that way with your thoughts, when you find yourself in a space where, damn, I'm not feeling it, I'm not vibing, it's not where I want to be, you got to kind of take it easy on yourself. Be a little more gentle. Or maybe, you talk yourself into drill instructor style. You get yourself, I don't know, whatever works for you. Only you know what works for you, but use it. But I offer you solace from the perspective of you certainly can. We talked about reprogramming our thoughts, building momentum, having the confidence to say, I started here. It sucks. I don't really want to be here. And I could chop, 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 chop myself all the way back to here. Even if it means giving yourself a breather, finding some rest, or remembering and repeating something that would make you feel good about life, right? Maybe go have some ice cream or a donut. That works too. Like, listen, whatever gets you there. I'll also say and offer what I believe we should really be encouraged by, which is I still got about 40 minutes of recording, right? I got better. because a lot of times too we'll find what makes you worse makes you better. I said this. One of my greatest mentors in leadership. I had one of the worst. Let me not say one of the worst. If you read a book on how to be a leader, everything they tell you that is non-conducive to a successful leader, this person just exuded all those traits. Could have used that book and many other books, but I didn't let that. I actually, when I see that, I'm like, this is easy. I can leap right over you because you're broken. There's something about you that is, I found in my experience with life. You broke yourself. I don't even got to do nothing else. That's why this whole idea of you're average, you suck, you're overweight, out of shape, and you don't know what you're doing and you don't make enough money. Why I need to, that's hard. That's a hard enough life as it is. I also believe, as I think I was going to say at one point, as part of the do you rules, when you start exposing yourself to self love, some of these things become very evident and obvious. How would I want to take care of myself? Take a good look in the mirror. How do I want to look when I look at myself in the mirror? You start asking yourself these questions. You start getting some answers that you may not necessarily like, but you start getting some answers. So in that way, I don't need to tell you about your average. If you don't know where you're at in the standards of life, when it comes to the health of your life, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, whatever. This is how I release this too. One, from a humility perspective, I know what it's like I said before, I know what it's like to be me. I know what it's like to be uncomfortable and insecure and doubt myself. I don't want nobody in that space, and I don't take enjoyment from knowing that you're in that space. But also, I don't need you fucking with me either because I know how sensitive I am and how difficult it is to maintain this pace. So I'm like, it's all right. You got to be, at some point, it's just you with you. And whether you realize it consciously or not, I know what it is. So I let that shit go. Whatever. You go deal with you. I'll go deal with me. You see how that works out for you. I know how it's going to work out for me. And so, yes, you can fight through that. Momentum helps. You can keep chopping. You can keep pushing through your agenda for the day and have success. You can have your targets and your aims, and some days you gain a mile, some days you gain a micro inch. Some days you move the hill, and some days you sit behind the hill and you hope that nobody comes over the top to take you out. That's just what it is. We got to go through those things. And life is cyclical and certainly offers you those levels. And as I always say, and I'll close here, you wouldn't know one without the other. It's the polarities of life. I believe on one end of the spectrum is fear, on one end is love, and you go through derivatives of what that is. And sometimes you're just here because you can't always be high and you can't always be low and you can't always be low and you can't always be high. So finding yourself centered is great, but also understanding how you work and how you operate and focusing on yourself and taking the time to see what you go through emotionally and what your thoughts are like will help you push past, persevere, and prosper. So there's that for what it's worth today. And also look, right? I feel good about this episode already. We probably got another 14 minutes or so here. I can't see, there's nobody chatting in the chat, but also I can't see if anybody's on, anybody's viewed. But I know I'm here. I showed up and I feel better about today than I did yesterday. And I thank God for that. And that's cool. Momentum. Perseverance. The ability to overcome. The transition from low to high to mid. Lack of confidence and doubt and insecurities into confidence, conviction, and ultimately the self-esteem that comes with being able to overcome. I believe is momentum driven. And if you're on day 13 with me and you had some goals to start the year and you're 13 days into executing on them, and maybe today's a day that you need to reflect, to rest and reflect because you've been putting in a lot of work and certainly you start to feel the effects of the work. There's a lot of the cliches and what they tell you. Like there is no growth without pain, and also a lot of what the early journey will tell you is, I believe you can't help but say, man, imagine being 40. This 43 trips around the sun. I'm going to be 44. Let's say you had your epiphany like me, like I always say, right before I turned 40, maybe in your mid 20s, maybe your early 20s, maybe in your 50s or your 60s. When you make a pivot and a change and you see how great it is for you, it's quite natural to say, man, why did I wait this long? And it's quite natural to start to feel like, because I waited this long, I'm only 13 days in, what am I doing? It's not going to work. It takes a while to build enough momentum to gain the confidence to say, 13 is going to turn to 14, 14 is going to turn to 15, 15 is going to turn to 16. And one of the things we want to do is in that way not measure. Of course, though, because of life, the way the life works and the beauty of life, past, present, future. Without past, present, future, yes, we got to be in the present. But if you're not always understanding how to be productive in the present, I use these words very fluently, always, because nothing nothing is really absolute unless you determine it to be. It's your life, your choice, your thoughts. But if I can say that I absolutely want to be successful with every present moment I have, then naturally, every time I'm present, I'm successful in the present. I create a better past, which thereby means I can see a better future. And now you start that, like, reflection. If I'm being great in the moment, I can reflect and say, I have some history that suggests I have established momentum to be able to overcome. I have enough reflection to say I have enough momentum to know that if I keep doing this, my future outlook is going to be great. 13 days in is awfully hard. There's not enough. So I said the other day, in the micro view, there's a macro view, of course, and then there's a micro view. You're trying to get micro wins. That's why the small wins are so important, and that's why stacking the wins and momentum is important. You might get caught. We might get caught. I certainly get caught saying, I have a very small sample size of success in what I'm doing right now, 13 days. I have like 40 years of macro view of how unsuccessful I've been. And so in that way, when you look at 13 days, whether you're conscious of it or not, whether you do it intentionally or not, the habits you've built in your brain, the patterns you've built in your brain, the memories you have of the past, it's all well and good to say the past is the past, let it go. But until you start to really rewire, reconfigure, and retrain yourself to be in the present because you want to be successful in the present, what you're doing is you're stacking the wins so you can look back and say, all right, I'm going to keep going because this has been fruitful. There's nothing about success that I've experienced in any way that doesn't say I got to prove it to myself. How do you prove it to yourself? You got to keep doing it over and over and over and over and over. But now when you start doing it over and over and over and over and over because you're making a change, you're fighting against all that you used to be. And the fight between all you believe you are right now, because you can change right now. You think it, boom, that's you right now. You turn the mic on, boom, you're an influencer. I said it, right? You go out for a jog, you're a runner. You lift weights, you're a lifter. But now, and I think a lot of us get caught in this. I was listening to something the day that we talk about consistency and patterns and momentum. There is no real benefit in you waking up today to say, I'm going to the gym for 12 and a half hours. And I'm going to lift for every single body part I have. I'm going to make everything in me sore because what's going to happen? If you put in 12 and a half hours in the gym today and then it stopped you from going to the gym for 2 weeks, you did nothing. But if you go to the gym every day for 2 weeks for 20 minutes, you've done something. And you may not have seen, I think a lot of times we get stuck in the visual stimulation of success. Well, if I go to the gym every day for 20 minutes, I may not lose a pound. You might not. Physically, nothing might change. That's a reality that sometimes we have to accept. The altering of what you're certainly not going to be, South Beach ready every day if you go to and that's another thing, right? So you're fighting. Your current corporeal physical form, whatever it looks like. If you got like me and you bloated up and had 6 chins and were 230 pounds because you were drinking alcohol every night, going to the gym every day for 30 days, 60 days is probably not going to do much of a difference. And again, it certainly is not going to make you want to take your shirt off. So in that way, you put in, we're on day 13. Imagine 60 days out. And then imagine having a day like I had yesterday. And then you look in the mirror and you're like, why am I doing this? It's that way with your mindset, your thoughts. That's why momentum and the reconfiguration of your mind is important. You're trying to stack enough wins so that when you reflect back into the past, because naturally we look back in the past, it dictates what we do in the present. It has a very high determination and probability of what our future is going to look like. If every time I came to the present, I felt like I don't have enough momentum because everything I built is 40 years of disgust, because a lot of times that's what happens when you come to the realization. That's why I don't care what people say. And I say, you got to go home with yourself. There's a level of disgust when you realize I'm not doing everything I can for myself. And that is for me the epiphany that I believe is the most powerful to get over yourself, is when you look at yourself and you're just totally disgusted. And you could be doing great things in a lot of great areas and still be disgusted, because there's so many ways to be powerful and experience the most love you can with your life, and it's to be the most dominant form you can be in every area, which also means you're accepting of your limitations. It's the acceptance that there's this infinite world, that the power of Creator in all of its perfection, I say this regularly, gave you infinite possibilities, but you're limited because you're a finite being. And so in that way, you got to be accepting of, you're not going to be all of everything and everything of all. You can't, because you're not God. You're of God's image. You have power of Creator, but you have limitations. So the power of being able to be accepting of fully the lifestyle of self-love is that I know I'm going to have some days that I realize my limitations. So momentum is helping us create a reflection that goes from 13 days to 15 days to 100 days to 1,000 days to all these hours, where I prove to myself that I am the person that I keep saying I am, that I can build what I said I would build, that I can reveal the future that I see for myself. Because if I keep chopping, if I keep watering, if I keep exposing to light and dark, and I create the environment for growth, then all that can happen is growth. But we got to go through the battle of our thoughts, because our thoughts create our habits create what we want to build for ourselves, and it's all instigated and provoked and antagonized by how we feel. The vibration of sound is merely us trying to express in words what we are feeling, and is trying to express itself in our soul, in our emotion, in our being. So in that way, the momentum to establish the patterns and the habits and the thoughts that are required to keep us even keeled, to keep us flowing, and to keep us growing, our momentum is a big thing. So if I can offer, as we approach our final minutes here, anything of significance around momentum, specific to how you're thinking this thing, because how you're thinking this thing is, of course, everything. The way consciousness works, you want to put yourself in a position where you have to think less about what it is you need to do, right? And this is why I talk about on time, all the time, same place, same times. Don't make it a repeatable process. It's why we say the alarm clock goes off at 3:30. I just get up. But we got to stack our habits and our patterns. I got to get up because why? Because I have a set of core values: honesty, integrity, that works on my self-esteem, to be confident that I can hold myself accountable. I'm building up accountability. I'm building up the will, the power of the will, the willpower, to immediately start how I said I would start, with the intention to begin my day with a routine and a pattern and a habit that, when I think about who I am, when I'm in the present, makes me feel good. So my routine, as I referenced already, is prayer and meditation. Very easy for me to feel inspired, if you would, when I know that I'm going to get up and I'm going to pray and meditate. and I'm going to go into a live stream, then I'm going to go into cardio, and in and around that, I hydrate. All these things, you put yourself in emotionally positive habits so that you can positively and emotionally positively. The way it's in my head is sometimes it doesn't come out in words, but you can look forward to an experience that's worth looking forward to because it is painful, it is arduous, it is difficult. But the reality to all of that is if it isn't, there is no growth. And if there's no growth, then it stays the same. And no one wants to keep repeating and doing the same things or get into the habit of trying to grow to remain the same. You don't want to do all the work and have no results yield themselves, which is why the idea of the momentum towards creating a routine of patterns and habits and structure where you almost script your life. I know what I'm doing from the minute I wake up to the minute I go to sleep that I can control. You get singularly focused in that way. The emotional experience of life becomes much more predictable, much more repeatable. You'll find that the if I'm just a thinking thing and I know what it is I need to be focused on and I'm doing because I have intentionality in that way, it becomes easier to think. Or I should say, you're more at ease with the thoughts that are going on in your mind because there's a level of predictability and expectation on, I have all these disciplines built up, these character traits, these accountability measures. I have momentum towards them. I can use it to say, this is what happens, and my alarm just went off. This is what happens when I get up when I say I'm going to get up. This is what happens when I get into my spirituality practice. This is what happens when I get into my strength training or my cardio. This is what happens when I script or I journal or I write. This is what happens when I get into something of creative flow and intentionality. This is what happens when I'm where I said I was going to be. At minimum, you don't get stuck thinking about what you should be doing. And when you're not stuck thinking about what you should be doing, you lessen the risk of thinking about all the things you have not done, which are all in the past and not coming back anyway. And in the same way, when you build momentum and you do get stuck thinking about all the things you haven't done, you can combat that with, like yesterday, man, I had a really bad stream, day 12. But immediately it's like, I had 11 good days. I had 11 good days. And imagine saying, for every 12 days you'll have one bad day out of 11. Or shrink it down to say, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a great day. You're less inclined to fall into that 1 out of 10 being something that encapsulates you, something that builds momentum towards more 1 out of 10 days. And all of a sudden you have the mindset, the framework, the discipline to love on yourself, regardless of the obstacles, regardless of the difficulties, regardless of how cold it is, regardless of how large the tree. I can just get into my repeatable process. I can get into what I know works for me. I can move the pendulum in any direction. And at minimum, life presents less excitement than we might want, but that's great because to dominate the mundane, to build up momentum towards executing on the micro, at some point anyway, there's going to be a massive transition, a massive change and shift that comes because with any time you're chopping, building slow, digging, it's guaranteed you'll find something. And if that's not worth it, I don't know what else is. But in any event, I'll close also with this. If you're not intentional with the momentum you're building in the direction of the life you see for yourself, loving on yourself, improving on yourself, it's not that you don't have momentum. It's that you have the momentum in the opposite direction, inclusive of doing nothing but standing still. And so your momentum is built around not being routine, being a little sporadic. You have a discipline to hit the snooze button on your life. It's your choice. Either way, it's your direction. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Do you and stay rich.